Hi, y'all. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Katie.
And I'm Brad.
And this is the Dharma Doctor podcast. And we are going to talk today with Brad Mosell, who is the founder of Dharma Doctor, and learn a little bit more about what this whole thing is all about.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, this is pretty exciting. We've never done anything like this before.
Neither of us have ever done anything like this.
So we are exploring a medium.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing where we go with it.
Yeah. So you want to tell me a little bit about, just give me what's the elevator pitch?
Elevator pitch. Dharma Doctor makes bilateral stimulation accessible so that we can, the elevator pitch is actually Dharma Doctor is the outfitter for the journey within. We make bilateral stimulation accessible to help with anxiety and underlying forms of trauma.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you are the founder of the company?
I am the founder.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're doing this all by yourself? How long have you been doing this for?
No, by now we have a few people on the team, but the company started about 2 years ago now. And at that time I was working as a teacher. I was teaching at, it was called Cardinal Academy, but it was a school for pregnant and parenting teens. And we were in the middle of COVID, middle of the pandemic, and I sort of recognized what we were in store for when it came to adolescent mental health. The way all of these changes had really derailed the educational system, and the potential problems that were going, and we've seen manifest over the last couple of years. So I recognized this oncoming tsunami and wanted to find a way to make an accessible mental health tool that could be used in non-clinical settings, so used in a classroom. Okay. And that was kind of the starting genesis of Dharma Doctor. So since then, we've been working on it for about 2 years, and we're hopefully going to launch the product by the end of the year.
And tell me a little bit about yourself. Just so obviously, you're a teacher, but how did you, from your own, what did you know about bilateral stimulation to even come to this as a possible solution for people?
Yeah. So we're here in Boise today, and I was raised out here. I was born in California, but we moved here when I was young. My childhood was pretty standard, I guess would be the easiest way of describing it. I grew up in a suburb in Eagle, Idaho, which is a pretty middle class, pretty safe environment. But despite that, I faced some challenges coming into my senior year. My dad was indicted, and I came home to sort of feds raiding the house, and everything kind of broke loose after that. Anyway, so I went to school in California, UC Berkeley, and I faced a variety of mental health challenges, and we can talk more about this journey, et cetera. But down the line, it wasn't until 2016 that I was first exposed to EMDR therapy. Okay. And EMDR stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing, and it's a form of therapy that's designed primarily for PTSD. Okay. Or was used primarily for PTSD, and it uses bilateral stimulation to help calm the brain and reprocess traumatic memories and embodied trauma.
And by bilateral stimulation, you're meaning you're using both sides of your brain, both sides of your body.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So bilateral stimulation refers to some sort of device that stimulates, kind of moves back and forth between the left and right side of your body. And so it can be visual, it can be tactile, as in vibrations, or it can be auditory, so you can use sounds. And you can go on any social media or Spotify and find bilateral beats that'll go back and forth between your headphones. But so EMDR uses this bilateral stimulation to help calm the brain, more or less. So the exact mechanism isn't always clear as to how this functions. There's a lot of different hypotheses, but one of the hypotheses is that it replicates what happens during REM sleep.
Okay.
So during REM sleep, your brain processes and moves a lot of your daily stressors into long-term or short-term memory, or like long-term memory, and it allows it to kind of clear the bank. And so one thought is that this bilateral stimulation triggers a similar effect in the brain as that. Another hypothesis is that, stress or a lot of these experiences that we have, they can be linked to what's called amygdala hijack. So, and that's your fight, flight, freeze response. And the bilateral stimulation is a way of manually stimulating the prefrontal cortex, which is like your reasoning, your thinking brain. So if you can stimulate the thinking brain, you can disengage your fight or flight response, which is your limbic brain or your emotional brain.
So it's essentially trying to get you to like take a beat, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Before just like completely reacting to something.
Take a beat and reprocess. So yeah, we're already kind of deep down the rabbit hole of how these things work, but that's my experience was that I went through EMDR therapy. It changed my life, and along with a lot of other spiritual practices that I have and spiritual paths that I've gone down. And so when I was teaching, what came to mind was how could we make a device or bilateral stimulation more accessible? And what would it be like to use that with students as a way of taking a beat?
Yeah.
And could we introduce it with content? Could we introduce it with telehealth? The pandemic gave rise to the telehealth phenomenon.
Yep.
And really accelerated its adoption across a lot of different areas. So we wanted to find a way to make telehealth, mental health, scalable and accessible, and effective, right?
Yeah.
And effective.
And I think the telehealth is great because obviously we needed it during the pandemic when people couldn't get to the doctor. But I think, right, like it made it more accessible. It made it, I think we've talked about this a lot, but there's a mental health crisis that we are like way behind on as a country, and I think probably globally. You are seeing it specifically in those kids, in high-risk students, high school kids, but it's everywhere. The pandemic really shed a light on it, but it also heightened it in general. And so can you talk to me a little bit about, I think what's really interesting about this is that we're talking about a hardware and like a software with this. So like talk to me about the hardware itself, which is how I first got introduced to this, and what these tabs are and how they work.
Yeah. So the tabs themselves, they come in a case that's similar to sort of your AirPods to make it. It's a charging case that makes it super accessible. And then the tabs are these two meditation stones that are Bluetooth connected and provide alternating tactile and visual bilateral stimulation. So they vibrate back and forth, and they have an LED that goes back and forth, and you can change the speed, you can change the intensity, and that alternation automatically helps calm the brain.
Okay.
Almost instantly. So there's been a couple studies that showed bilateral stimulation calmed the brain within like 30 seconds. So
it's instantaneous relief.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, pretty much instantaneous.
Which is also really hard to find anywhere else. There's not a lot of mental health solutions that.
No, and there are other competitors on the market like Sensate or Apollo Neuro that use a similar vibration to help calm the nervous system. We use bilateral stimulation as the main mechanism, but yes, it's pretty difficult to find anything non-pharmaceutical that will provide this sort of relief or that could be used in a non-invasive way. So the tabs themselves were designed to be used by anybody, anywhere, at any time, and they're totally autonomous. You can just pull them out, and they turn on, and use them before your meeting or before your test, or if your kids are having a stressful day with the kids,
So you gave me a pair of tabs, some of the prototypes to try.
Yeah,
I have
one of the early prototypes.
Early prototypes, yep.
These things were still pretty rough.
And she was 5 then. I have 2 little girls, and she was having like a really big emotion and kind of just, she was shut down, which is I
Yeah,
think
that's
the perfect
5-year-olds
scenario.
do.
Yep. She was like, I don't know if I'd call it a tantrum, but just essentially like she was blocked. And I just turned the tabs on and handed them to her, had her sit on the couch first, trying to kind of relax her, and instantly like stopped doing whatever she was doing in her brain and just was kind of like, what are these things? What are these things in my hand? And it was really cool to watch just, I mean, as a parent, being able to give that to a kid where they're sort of, their emotions feel so big that they can't kind of get out of them on their own, right? And so I
Yeah.
instantly was like, this is something I want to help, get out to market, because just seeing the help of this. We kind of jumped into this, but Brad and I met maybe through like a referral of someone in town.
Yeah. Vision Kit.
Yeah. Okay.
Matt connected us originally.
Yeah, and I have a background in brand marketing and like creative production, and have been working with the Commonwealth, which is like a co-working art space here in Boise, and sort of just found my way into helping startups kind of with their sort of brand messaging. And like,
Yeah.
I think when you, especially like when you're trying to go to market and you are constantly pitching this idea that you hold so tightly, sometimes it's hard to sort of step back from that and say, like, how do you explain this to your average person? And how do you just like make sure that you have a guiding star where so much feedback that's coming in doesn't deter you from why you built the product to begin with? And so that's how we kind of got involved in so that's a story of my daughter, but my husband actually, I feel like was really saved with EMDR treatment.
Yeah, he had some experiences with EMDR.
Yeah, he lost his parents when he was younger, and then when he was like I think 17, his best friend had an accident, and so he had a lot of death and a lot of trauma that he kind of never processed. And during lovely COVID, when we were all sort of just living in our small little bubbles and all of those things, some of that really came to a head. And we found a therapist here in town. He did, she specialized in EMDR, and it was the first therapy ever that like really resonated with him and really helped him and gave him like this whole toolkit. So the idea, I saw that firsthand through his journey and how it helped him. But it very much is something he like has to go to a clinician, has to make an appointment. It's not cheap in this country to do therapy, if you're lucky enough to even have insurance. And so the idea that you can buy these tabs one time and they can help you in those situations. And so I think that is something that is a really cool story and like really important, because it may be the first step in getting you the therapy that you need. But we're trying to like break down the barrier to entry.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a important shift. When there's a lot of spiritual elders that I talk to sort of regularly, and many of them have talked about this moment that we're coming into a spiritual awakening of some form. But I think your description of COVID was kind of like that, like when we were all forced to just be with ourselves
and
sit for a bit.
All the stimulation was sort of taken away.
Everything kind of bubbles up to the surface. But there's this important shift in thinking that is taking place right now, and there's one of the New York Times bestseller, "The Body Keeps the Score," does a really good job of talking about this. But the idea that the experiences that we live through, the trauma, it's actually physically embedded in your system. Like it's in your nervous system, it's in your body, and unless we find a way to allow the body to release that, it guides a lot of our ability to react and interact with our environment. So, what we see as potentially destructive or societally destructive behaviors is actually the effect or the result of a lot of stored up energy and a lot of collectively stored trauma.
Yeah.
And, bilateral stimulation, EMDR, a lot of what it does is allows the body to process and release this stored trauma. So, in building a device, part of the idea was, all forms of therapy traditionally have this one-on-one human-to-human interaction, but that's not scalable.
Yep.
Right. A lot of the problems that we've seen are social media, technology, the discussions around that. the reason that these things are so powerful is because technology. The reason technology is so powerful is that it's scalable, right? Hardware, is less scalable than software, but it is still scalable in that we can create one device and distribute it to a large number of people. And if we can build scalable solutions to release that collective trauma or that energy, we make a societal impact individually, right? We help one person at a time, and that can collectively make a larger impact. So we wanted to build a device, right, that could be used by anybody and is as appropriate in a classroom as it is in an office, as it is in a therapist's office. So anyone can independently begin this process of working through the experiences that they've stored. So yeah, it's an interesting space because mental health it's just so personal and it's so intimate and it runs so deep. But we think that the tabs are particularly cool because you can use them for your daily stress, but you can also use them to get to some of the deeper underlying memories or beliefs that are guiding your life.
And so how do you see these working with someone who, so I think this is sort of the entry point into understanding that this bilateral stimulation is really helpful. Like someone could, like I said, my 5-year-old who's having big emotions, doesn't know how to deal with them, it instantly helps her. All the way to how you would work with a practitioner with them. Because I think that's what's really neat about these two is they have, there's kind of a lot of different levels in the way that this product is helpful.
Yeah. Bilateral stimulation is as core to the human experiences as going for a walk.
Right.
That left
or
and
dancing.
right, or dancing.
Yep.
This left and right use of the body. We do it naturally when we feel stressed. I'm stressed. I need to go for a walk or go for a swim.
And it's why the walk feels good.
It's why the walk feels good. Along with other cardiovascular endorphins and things like that. But we do it naturally, and it wasn't until this therapist by the name of Francine Shapiro, and she's sort of the mother of EMDR. But she took that. She actually went on this walk and had this realization, and then she used that to try and operationalize bilateral stimulation to refine it and use it as a tool that could be applied in various situations. So, yeah, bilateral stimulation it's incredibly natural. It's very natural to the human experience, and the effect of that is that it's a simple solution that we can use in a lot of different ways, and we can use it in conjunction with other tools and with other techniques and protocols, and one of those protocols is EMDR. There is quite a bit of experimentation with some other protocols right now, but it's a very very safe and very natural solution for anybody.
And so through the use of the tabs and the app, you can actually work with a practitioner, and you can connect the tabs.
Yeah. So the tabs, we talked about, they can be used independently, but they also pair with our Dharma Dr app. And the Dharma Dr app allows for a couple different interesting use cases. One is that, yes, they can be used for telehealth. So if two people have the app and a therapist wants to do remote EMDR, they share a code that the client puts into their app, and then can control the tabs. Then they can control the tabs remotely from anywhere in the world. And the first remote EMDR session we ever hosted was actually from Italy to Boise a few months back. But that's one of the levels that you can then move up to if you started using them independently, but you decided you wanted to see a clinician.
Yep.
The other piece of the puzzle is we are able to distribute self-guided exercises. So meditations or self-guided EMDR or self-guided bilateral stimulation exercises.
Okay.
That anybody can do on their own.
Okay. And that's something that we're going to kind of explore as part of this podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
The idea is that you can, we're going to have a couple of these interviews with practitioners to just, because there's a lot of different ways to approach this kind of therapy. And then we also are going to try to make some bite-sized meditations and exercises that people can do to just help you when you need it, which I think that is the biggest thing, right? Where not everybody can take an hour out of their day and go see someone, but you might need a 2-minute or a 5-minute meditation that you feel like you can trust to, I think, which is important. Because, I mean, of course, there's a lot of content out there on mental health.
I mean, we're really exploring this edge of accessibility and scalability, right, and efficacy, and the way that those three things can be used to make a positive impact in the world of mental health.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think the plan is, to work with different clinicians to build some of these meditations and some of these exercises. We want to build something that could be a whole independent methodology, a whole independent protocol.
Yep.
As well as, varied voices and varied perspectives, and something that will resonate. We want to collect, stories that will resonate with anybody.
So as Brad and I have been kind of thinking through who to talk to and how these are going to work, I was surprised because I guess of my husband's use, I always just think of it as like trauma therapy, right?
Yeah.
And it's absolutely not that. And it's not that. It's just not only that. I think that's like a use case that's probably the most common. But we will be talking to a guy, James, in town, who's a professor, and he uses it for athletes. And like, not that we have to give all of that away, but just I didn't realize that. So can you just tell me a little bit about?
Well, yeah. I mean, the idea that you can use bilateral stimulation to relax your fight or flight response means you can become more focused.
Yeah.
You can calm the anxiety, and that's performance. Right? That there's a whole sector of mental health that is just focused around performance enhancement and performance optimization. And bilateral stimulation can be used for that too.
Yeah.
Right? Like before the big game, before the big test, before the big presentation. This doesn't necessarily have to be the emergency response, or it doesn't have to be long-term trauma reprocessing. It can also be performance optimization.
How do you use the tabs?
Oh, I've used them for everything. Yeah. I mean, it's nice to be a founder of a mental health company that has a solution for stress, because founding a mental health company is probably founding a company is the most stressful thing you can do. So I've used them, before pitches. I've used them before important investor meetings. I use them before this podcast.
And you just kind of like sit down, put the tabs on in a quiet place. Like, how do you walk me through actually what it looks like?
Maybe I sit down. Maybe I'm just holding them.
Okay.
I literally have them in my pocket and I whip them out and I just hold on.
So you find benefits even just in using them that simply?
Yeah, easy. One of the early investors, we were at this conference here in town. It was an entrepreneur week, and I hadn't met her. But I just walked up to her and I turned them on, and I basically just put them in her hands. She was having a conversation with another guy, and I was like, "Here, just hold on to these while you finish your conversation." Yeah. And by the end of the conversation, she was sold. She was like, we hadn't said a word yet, and she was like, "I would buy these for myself and my daughters. Yeah. What are they? Yeah. And who are you?" And
perfect.
That was it. And so you can use them anytime, anywhere, and I do. I also use them with my students. That was the genesis, and it has been the most rewarding part of the company so far.
Yep.
A lot of the students I work with are somewhere, they would be labeled as somewhere on the spectrum.
Okay.
But all are, identified as at risk, but have some degree of adversity or some degree of challenge that they're facing. And I had this one student who, for the purposes of the podcast, we'll call Charlie.
Okay.
But Charlie played a video game that was. Do you remember Dance Dance Revolution?
Oh yeah.
Where you're like dancing and you had to hit the
arrows. Like follow the steps. Yeah.
So he would love to play this video game that was like DDR, but you just use the up, down, and arrows on the keyboard.
Oh, okay.
And they're like singing some sort of song.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he would play this game, and I would let him play it for a certain number of minutes, and then we would work on his math or whatever. And he was playing this game, And I just wanted to do an experiment. So I gave him the tabs and said, hey, like, hold on to these for 30 seconds, right? And then I want you to play that same song again and just see what happens. And so he did, and his score went up by like, I don't know, we'll call it 50 points, but some significant amount. And he freaked out. He was like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing ever. I haven't been able to get this score this high. And, you know, he wants me to sponsor him with like Dharma Doctor. And so maybe down the line we have an esports, Dharma Doctor esports sponsorship. But it was something like that, you know, and that was the gateway for me to talk to him about using him in other places of his life, right? Because he struggled with, you know, responsibly reacting to stimuli that he found troubling, you know, a lot of behavioral health issues. And if we could use the bilateral stimulation in one area, we can use it in the other areas, and it opened that door. But just like, you know, your story with your 5-year-old, I would be teaching, and, you know, one of my students would come in and she would have just had a difficult conversation with her baby daddy, and, you know, the kids are in a tough spot and full tantrum mode, you know, 5-year-olds and 16-year-old girls, lots of big emotions.
There's a lot of emotions.
Lots of big emotions. And so in those circumstances too, it's just like, here, hold on to these for a second.
And it is pretty wild to watch, like, how, and if, you know, and it's as simple as just, you have something else to focus on, and it's hard. You know, I think especially as a parent and a new parent, you know, you're like, I'm constantly trying to think of like the right language of like, take a breath. And, you know, my husband and I talk about all these things that we say to our kids, and we're like, in what world would me in a heightened emotional situation have someone walk up to me and be like, just take a breath? And that doesn't actually work. Right. So,
I mean, even practicing Buddhists,
right,
still struggle to just find the time for meditation.
Right. And so to have something that's like instantaneous, like you said, there just really isn't anything else out there outside of like, cool down, take a walk. There's a reason why people have been saying that forever. Count to 5 before you say something. You know, it's all kind of that same
box breathing.
Yeah, it's great.
Box breathing, butterfly hugs. I mean, the exercises exist. The problem is remembering to do them.
Yep.
And
being calm enough to do them.
To do them. You know, when we're triggered, it's not that easy. So having a device you can just grab, that was sort of the game changer.
Yeah. So when you were creating these, I think it was very much, you had said something to me once that you wanted to sort of create the thing that you needed when you were 18, right? And think through, you know, this is very much like the end user. But then as you've talked to more practitioners, they're super excited about it. Like I showed these to my husband. He talked to his practitioner about him, and her feedback immediately was, yeah, the stuff that we have just breaks all the time. Like, it's just like universally a very important tool, like the actual tabs, or whether it's a light bar that you're following. But generally speaking, they're not great, right? And there isn't just like, and they're expensive. And so I think this is a really unique solution just for practitioners. Yeah.
I mean, independent of Dharma Doctor, EMDR therapy is one of the fastest growing modalities of therapy in the country, and it is, you know, incredibly effective. It's expanded beyond PTSD. It's being used for anxiety. It's being used for depression. It's being used in all sorts of different areas. And so as that happens, you know, more and more practitioners that we talk to are shifting away from other, you know, previous practices and moving towards EMDR, and they're looking for better tools to use with their clients. And the landscape of mental health solutions, what's happened over the last couple of years is, you know, there's been an onslaught of new companies that are developing ways to find a therapist, right? But that doesn't solve the shortage of therapists that we have, right? Yeah. And then there's another group that's trying to provide mental health mental health telehealth, right? And they're providing telehealth services, but a lot of those telehealth services are, you know, they're using older methodologies or cognitive behavioral therapy. And while that can be effective, the results that we're seeing, right? And if you're interested in learning more about that, you know, Tom Insel who at one point was the director of the National Institute of Mental Health. He has some great statistics around this, but we're not seeing an impact.
Yeah.
Right. Like these companies aren't changing the trajectory of the country of the results. Deaths of despair are still going up. And so we found, there's these companies that are trying to link to new therapists. There are these companies that are providing therapists through telehealth, but there isn't a whole lot of innovation that's happening at the actual level of providing a service, you know, like the actual service provided, or a stepped care, model of accessibility. Like those things are not really changing. And so the people that could get health are still getting health, but they're getting it, or could get services or getting services, but in a different way.
Yeah.
And the services that they're getting aren't, we're not sure how effective they are. And so, Dharma Doctor is really trying to solve at a different level.
Yeah.
The first is we want people to have access that previously wouldn't have had access, and people who struggle to reach out for help to reach out and just try the tabs on their own. And then through that gateway, we open the door to a stepped care model.
Yep.
For higher levels of care. And we're going to be playing with AI and playing with ways to use large language models to provide personalized feedback in this process, and customized care in support of therapists, right? Like we built a safe place image visualizer.
Okay.
So one of the first exercises that you might do with an EMDR therapist is to imagine a place where you feel safe. And so we built a image visualizer where you type that in and it creates an image for you. And it's not perfect, it's growing. But tools like that therapists can also use that actually change the way the therapy is implemented and make it, more effective. And so yeah, we're trying to do something that really nobody else in the market is doing.
So where are you right now in the whole process? So
so right now we are beginning production for our first batch, and
by batch you mean of the actual tabs?
Of the actual tabs.
Yep.
So we're producing our first batch of actual tabs. We've developed the app, and we hope to have the product to market by the end of the year.
Okay.
We did a small pre-sale and we sold out, and
awesome.
We likely will be able to sell some more units, so stay tuned. But the goal is that we'll have product to market by the end of the year.
So if somebody wants to be involved in this, wants to continue in this journey, be updated, what's the best way for someone to connect with Dharma Doctor at this point in the game?
At this point, reaching out through our website, dharmadoctor.com, dharmadr.com. We have there's a contact button that's easy to use, or you can reach out to me directly, Brad Mosell, Mosell. I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I'm not famous enough yet to have somebody else answering my LinkedIn. So
you'll be talking straight to Brad.
Yeah, you'll be talking straight to me. Yeah. I still answer all of my own emails. So you can, those are probably the two easiest ways to get in touch with the company.
Awesome. All right, well, let's move on to do some actual meditations and exercises.
Sweet.